Thank you. Be seated. Well, now that we have made history by declaring Global Resilience Sunday, I thought I would spend a few minutes explaining, well, so what did we just get ourselves into here? For one thing, every culture all over the world, going back thousands of years, has found it important to their livelihood and well-being to have some kind of Thanksgiving service. There were people who looked up in the sky and they noticed the phases of the moon, and they noticed the movements of the stars. And they said that has something to do with our health and our survival and who we are as a people. So some of the oldest forms of Thanksgivings are for the universe itself and how somehow the universe magically sustains us. Then as people began to form hunter-gatherer societies and they followed the paths of the rivers and they noticed the migrations of the animals, they realized that paying attention to the seasons of growth and the seasons of migration has something to do with our survival. And so they would have Thanksgiving feasts to celebrate the harvests of the food that was given to them along the riverbanks. They had nothing to do with. It was a gift. And the animals whose paths crossed theirs so that they could hunt them and feast on them, they were also gifts. So Thanksgiving took a different form among the hunter-gatherer societies. And then as groups began to form villages with agriculture, they had to learn this is the time, folks, when it's time to plant. And whether you feel like it or not, whatever the weather is, this is the time to do it. Later on, you cultivate along, and then there's going to be a time for the harvest. And if you don't harvest, when it's time to harvest, you could easily, I don't know any groups that made a festival out of not celebrating the harvest because they're all extinct, I guess. But the ones that are around have left us with harvest Thanksgiving celebrations. Then there were cities and cultures that formed civilizations, and they started being grateful because they had withstood a terrible drought or a storm, or they had withstood an invasion, or someone arose from among them and lived a heroic and exemplary life. So history and identity became what people are grateful for. And now people are grateful for an ideal, a vision, a dream, a set of values that they hold dear. And so people now give thanks that they are blessed to be a part of the group that is trying to live by those ideals. And even if they fall, they can return again. So here we are with all of these different kinds of cultural forms of Thanksgiving. For example, in ancient Judaism, there was a celebration called Sukkot. And it lasted 7 days, and the first day, no one worked. And they were remembering how, in their society, rest is just as important as work, and they remembered that. They also remembered their stories of how they were wandering out in the desert for 40 years, and they didn't have an identity, and they didn't know where they were going. And some people got real anxious because if you don't have a goal and if you don't have a leader, and so they would give thanks that somehow we got through that. And so songs and chants have come down to us for thousands of years through the Jewish tradition of saying, whatever else has happened, even when we didn't have a land, even if we didn't know where we were going, we have survived. And some of the great music of the Jewish tradition has that triumph. Whatever else, we have survived. even shortly after that, ancient Rome, they had all the different gods and goddesses, and so they had a goddess whose name is Ceres, the goddess of corn, and our word cereal comes from the goddess Ceres. So if you've ever had cornflakes, you've been given thanks to the goddess Ceres, just like the ancient Romans did. But it expanded in October to be a time to celebrate fruits and grains and animals. And they had new music and parades and new sports, that all because they want to somehow give thanks to the fact that they still are alive. In China, for thousands of years, they've noticed the August moon, the first moon, and they believe that the moon is roundest and brightest on this day, and that must have something to do with the blessed life that they live. So on the day of the roundest and brightest moon, they held their celebrations of Thanksgiving. Throughout Africa, harvest festivals of various kinds feature dancing and singing, and people get to make new masks and wear the old ones, and they put on costumes. One of the most popular festivals in many tribes is the Festival of Yams. Who knew that yams were so healthy that they would have a festival to give thanks for yams? Well, the people today that are very concerned about the environment and local foods and eating food you grow and food that's grown nearby, yams is big in their celebration. So even today, people are going back around and giving thanks for yams. In Bali, they have a week-long celebration, again, a lunar festival. And the first day, not only is no work, no talking. For an entire day, everyone in the tribes and in the villages do not speak to each other. I can imagine that was a real hard thing to do, to say, I just thought, sure, I couldn't get by without talking, but for one whole holy day, I managed to keep my mouth shut, and so did all these annoying neighbors. That's worth celebrating. And so they would have Thanksgiving. In India, most of the Hindu festivals are still directed to agriculture, but in a different way, because even though 70% of the people still live out in rural areas and provide the food for the 30% that live in the cities, the same celebration is the people in the cities say on their Thanksgiving day called Pongal, we are thankful for the folks who provide us the food. And the folks who live out in the areas where the food is grown say, we are thankful that you buy our food and keep us alive. So it's a urban-rural form of Thanksgiving. So here we are, the beneficiaries of all of these different kinds of ways of celebrating. And what I want to say today is the resilient way of acknowledging these gifts from all these different kinds of cultures is to say, how do I combine them so that on any given day, in any given moment, I can be grateful, and I can sort through these different ways to be grateful, but there's not a time in my life but there's something out there to be grateful for. In the Middle Ages, they taught children how to understand philosophy and theology and science with a little bit of doggerel. And they taught it to them in Latin. Litera gesta docet, quod credas allegoria, moralia quod agas, quod tendas anagogia. The litera, the literal sense teaches us what happened. The allegorical sense teaches us what everyone is to believe. The moralia, the moral sense, is what about me? What personal beliefs should I learn to practice for myself? And the anagogical level is, so what's it all about ultimately? What is it all about from an eternal standpoint? And so children learn that at any given situation that they see, They learn to see it on the literal level. This is what happened. On the allegorical level, this is what it means to everybody in the world. The moral level, this is what it means to me, what are my personal beliefs. And the anagogical, what does it mean ultimately, even by the end of time? So it seems to me that we're not children of the Middle Ages anymore, but those four ways of perceiving reality are still very helpful. In each of those four levels, we can say there's something of value. Everything that happens to me has a literal and an allegorical and a moral and an anagogical meaning to me. So I don't ever take for granted these ordinary things, ho-hum another day. Yeah, but what are these four levels of meaning of this ho-hum that's every day?